Captain Sarah Martinez watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction as the last Devourer bio ship exploded in brilliant orange flames. Her destroyer squadron had successfully defended the mining colony on Vega Prime, but the cost had been higher than she liked. 2 ships lost, over 300 crew members dead, and ammunition reserves down to 30%. Casualties and damage reports coming in now, Captain, announced Lieutenant Commander Torres from the communication station. The Prometheus took a direct hit to her reactor core. Total loss with all hands. The Defiance lost main engines and is dead in space, but her crew is alive and requesting immediate evacuation. Sarah nodded grimly, already calculating the strategic implications. Humanity's small fleet couldn't afford to lose ships at this rate, not when every engagement seemed to bring larger and more aggressive Devourer forces. The latest attack had involved over 200 bio ships compared to the 50 or 60 that had characterized earlier raids. Signal the colony administrators, she ordered. Full evacuation protocols, priority 1. I want every civilian off-planet within 48 hours. Ma'am, the colonists are requesting permission to stay and defend their homes, Torres replied. Colony Administrator Peterson says they can't abandon 15 years of terraforming work. Tell Peterson that his terraforming work won't matter if there's nobody left alive to enjoy it, Sarah snapped. We can always rebuild colonies. We can't resurrect the dead. The bridge fell silent as crew members focused on their duties. Everyone understood the harsh mathematics of their situation. Humanity controlled 47 star systems with a combined population of nearly 200 billion people. The Galactic Council had once represented over 400 species across thousands of systems. If civilizations that advanced couldn't stop the Devourers, humanity's chances looked increasingly grim. But there was something the Galactic Council didn't understand about human nature, something that made their recent plea for military assistance both predictable and pointless. Humans didn't fight wars to save other people. They fought wars to win them. 3 days later, Sarah found herself sitting in a secured conference room deep within the United Earth government's military headquarters on Luna. Around the table sat the most senior military commanders and political leaders in human space, all studying classified intelligence reports that would have terrified any civilian population. The situation is worse than we initially believed, announced General Harrison, the graying veteran who had led Earth's military forces for the past decade. Latest intelligence estimates suggest the Devourer swarms have consumed roughly 60% of known galactic civilization in just 3 months. At their current expansion rate, they'll reach the edge of human space within 18 to 24 months. Which gives us time to prepare, interjected Admiral Chun, the President's younger sister and commander of Earth Space Forces. Our defensive engagements have proven that Devourer bio ships can be destroyed using conventional weapons if we apply sufficient firepower and tactical coordination. At an unsustainable cost, countered General Morrison from the Colonial Defense Corps. We're losing ships and personnel at a 3-to-1 ratio. Even if we mobilize every available resource, we can't maintain those loss rates for 2 years of continuous fighting. President Chun, attending the meeting via secure hologram from Earth, leaned forward in her chair. What are our alternatives? The Galactic Council's request for assistance was essentially begging us to throw our forces into a losing battle to buy them time for evacuation. That's not strategy, that's suicide. There is another option, said Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the slight, intense woman who directed Earth's xenobiology research program. We've learned more about devourer physiology and behavior patterns in 3 months than the rest of the galaxy managed in their entire first contact protocols. That knowledge gives us advantages they never had. Sarah studied the xenobiologist with interest. Warren's team had been dissecting captured devourer biomass since the first encounters, and their findings had revolutionized human understanding of the enemy. What kind of advantages? The Galactic Council approached this crisis like a conventional military conflict, Warren explained, activating a holographic display that showed detailed anatomical scans of devourer organisms. They tried to outfight an enemy using traditional tactics and technologies. They never really studied what they were fighting. The display zoomed in to show cellular structures that seemed to shift and flow even in death. Devourer organisms aren't just biological entities. They're essentially living weapons designed around a single imperative: consume and convert all available matter into more of themselves. Everything about their physiology supports that goal. We already knew they were some kind of bioweapons, pointed out Admiral Chun. That's why conventional tactics haven't worked. Yes, but bioweapons have creators, Warren continued. The Devourers didn't evolve naturally. They were engineered by something else. And anything that can be engineered can be reverse-engineered, modified, or turned against its original purpose. A chill ran through the conference room as the implications became clear. "You're talking about biological warfare," said General Harrison slowly. "I'm talking about fighting fire with fire," Warren replied firmly. The galaxy's major civilizations never considered using biological weapons because they viewed such tactics as primitive or unethical. Humans have no such compunctions. President Chen's hologram flickered as she shifted uncomfortably. "Dr. Warren, are you suggesting we develop our own bioweapons based on Devourer technology?" "I'm suggesting we've already begun," Warren said with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent months pursuing this exact research. "My team has isolated the genetic sequences responsible for devourer reproduction and growth acceleration. We've identified the neural pathways that control their hive coordination systems. Most importantly, we've discovered how to disrupt their cellular cohesion at the molecular level." She paused, letting the information sink in before delivering the crucial point. "We can create modified organisms that will spread through devourer swarms like a plague, breaking down their bioships from within while turning their own consumption imperative against them. The more they try to absorb our bioweapons, the faster the infection spreads." "Jesus Christ," whispered Colonel Jackson from Special Operations. "You're talking about genocide on a galactic scale." "I'm talking about survival," Warren corrected coldly. "The Devourers have already committed genocide against 60% of known intelligent species. They're not going to stop, negotiate, or show mercy. This is an extinction-level threat, and extinction-level threats require extinction-level responses." The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the moral and practical implications. Sarah found herself thinking about the hundreds of crew members who had died defending Vega Prime, multiplied by thousands of similar engagements across human space. How many more would die if they tried to fight a conventional war against an unconventional enemy? "What would be the timeline for deployment?" asked General Harrison finally. 6 months for initial prototypes, another 6 for large-scale production and distribution systems, Warren replied. "We'll need to test the bioweapons on captured devourer specimens first, but preliminary modeling suggests a 90% effectiveness rate within the first wave of infection. And afterward," President Chen's voice carried a note of concern that everyone in the room understood. "What happens to these bioweapons once the devourer threat is eliminated?" Warren's expression didn't change. "The organisms are designed with built-in termination sequences. Once they exhaust available devourer biomass, they'll consume themselves and break down into harmless organic compounds. The entire weapon system is essentially self-destructing." "Essentially," repeated Admiral Chun, "but not definitely." "Nothing in warfare is definite," Warren replied sharply. "But the alternative is watching the Devourers consume everything in the galaxy, including Earth and all human colonies. I'd rather take calculated risks than face certain annihilation." Sarah watched the exchange with growing understanding of humanity's strategic position. The Galactic Council had rejected their membership because they considered humans too violent and unpredictable for civilized space. Now those same qualities were humanity's greatest advantages against an enemy that had proven unstoppable using civilized methods. "There's something else to consider," she interjected, drawing everyone's attention. Our refusal to help the Galactic Council wasn't just about preserving our own forces. It was about buying time for Dr. Warren's research while letting the Devourers exhaust themselves against conventional defenses. President Chun nodded slowly. Every council world the Devourers consume weakens them for the final confrontation. Every conventional fleet they destroy removes potential interference with our unconventional methods. "You're talking about using the entire galaxy as bait," said General Morrison, his voice heavy with the implications. "We're talking about winning a war," corrected Admiral Chun. The Galactic Council had their chance to defeat this threat using their advanced technology and superior resources. They failed. Now it's time for humanity to handle the situation our way. The meeting continued for another 3 hours, covering logistics, resource allocation, and contingency plans. By the end, humanity's course was clear. They would let the Devourers continue consuming the galaxy while preparing bioweapons that would turn the enemy's greatest strength into a fatal weakness. It was a cold, calculating strategy that would result in the deaths of trillions of galactic citizens who might otherwise be saved through conventional military intervention. It was exactly the kind of ruthless pragmatism that had led the Council to reject human membership in the first place. It was also the only plan with a realistic chance of saving anyone at all. As the meeting concluded and participants began filing out, Sarah lingered to speak privately with Dr. Warren. The Galactic Council representatives who requested our help. They seemed desperate enough to offer anything for military assistance. Warren nodded. Complete technology sharing, full membership, territorial concessions. They were willing to give humanity everything we originally wanted. But we turned them down anyway, Sarah continued, because we knew that joining a losing war wouldn't help anyone, especially ourselves. "The galaxy is learning what human nature really means," Warren replied with a thin smile. "We don't fight for glory or ideology or moral principles. We fight to win by any means necessary, using every advantage we can create or acquire. And if our bioweapons succeed in destroying the Devourers..." Warren's smile widened slightly. "Then humanity will be the dominant military power in a galaxy that's been conveniently cleared of most potential rivals. The surviving civilizations will be so grateful for their rescue that they'll accept any terms we choose to offer, including membership in a new galactic organization under human leadership, including anything we want," Warren confirmed. "Victory has its privileges, Captain, and this victory will belong entirely to humanity." Outside the conference room windows, Earth turned slowly against the star-filled backdrop of space. Somewhere out there, the Devourers continued their relentless advance toward human territory. But for the first time since the crisis began, Sarah felt genuinely optimistic about humanity's chances. Not because humans were more moral or noble than other species, but because they were more ruthless. The galaxy had rejected them for being too violent and unpredictable. Soon, that same galaxy would discover exactly why those qualities made humans the most dangerous species in known space. Dr. Elizabeth Warren stood in the center of the most secure laboratory facility in human space, watching as her team made final preparations for humanity's ultimate gamble. The underground complex on Titan had been expanded dramatically over the past year, its corridors now housing research equipment and biological specimens that would have horrified the galaxy's more civilized species. Row upon row of containment vessels lined the laboratory walls, each one holding carefully cultivated samples of modified Devourer biomass. These weren't the crude organic weapons that other species might develop. They were precision-engineered biological systems designed to exploit every weakness humanity had discovered in their enemy's physiology. "Final batch of Omega variants is ready for deployment," announced Dr. Chun, Warren's chief researcher, and the woman responsible for solving the most complex aspects of the bioweapon project. Neural inhibition effectiveness increased to 97%. Cellular breakdown acceleration improved by 400% over previous generations. Warren nodded approvingly, as she reviewed the latest test results on her tablet. The Omega variants represented 18 months of intensive research and development, incorporating lessons learned from thousands of captured Devourer specimens and hundreds of combat engagements. Each organism was essentially a living weapon specifically designed to turn the enemy's greatest strengths against them. The genius of the approach lay in its fundamental premise. Rather than trying to outfight the Devourers using conventional weapons, humanity had chosen to become them. The bioweapons were constructed using actual Devourer genetic material, modified to carry fatal flaws that would spread throughout enemy populations like a plague. To external observation, the infected bioships would appear completely normal. They would continue following standard behavioral patterns, consuming target worlds and converting biomass into new Devourer units. But, hidden within their cellular structure, the modified genetic sequences will be slowly corrupting their ability to maintain cohesion and coordinate with other units. The process was designed to be gradual enough that individual bioships might function normally for weeks or even months after initial infection. But as the corrupted genetic material spread through reproduction and biomass absorption, entire Devourer swarms would begin experiencing cascade failures that would ultimately result in complete organizational collapse. "What's our deployment timeline?" asked Warren, though she already knew the answer from the dozens of previous briefings and coordination meetings. "First wave launches in 6 hours," Dr. Chen replied. "Modified freighter vessels will carry the bioweapons to predetermined coordinates along the Devourer advance front. The delivery system is designed to mimic standard organic matter. The enemy should attempt to absorb the weapons without detecting any threat. And our own defensive preparations? All human territories have been equipped with the immunity protocols," confirmed Dr. Martinez, the team's defensive specialist. "Our bioships and personnel carry genetic markers that should protect them from cross-contamination. The weapons are designed to target specifically Devourer physiology." Warren appreciated the careful phrasing, "should protect," rather than "will protect." Nothing about biological warfare was ever completely predictable, and any organism capable of learning and adapting might eventually develop countermeasures against human defenses. But the alternative was certain extinction, so acceptable risks had to be accepted. "Ma'am," interrupted Lieutenant Roberts from the communications station, "we're receiving priority transmissions from the Galactic Council Emergency Headquarters. They're requesting immediate response from senior leadership." "Put it through," Warren ordered, though she suspected she knew what the transmission would contain. The holographic display flickered to life, showing Ambassador ZYX Thor's familiar forearm figure. The alien diplomat looked exhausted and desperate, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled from months of crisis management. "Dr. Warren, thank you for accepting this communication," ZYX Thor began, his translator rendering the words in heavily accented English. "I'm reaching out to you directly because our intelligence services have detected unusual patterns in Devourer behavior that we believe may be related to human activities." Warren kept her expression neutral, though internally she was calculating how much the Council might have discovered about humanity's true strategic intentions. "I'm not sure what you mean, Ambassador. Our analysts have identified correlations between human military engagements and subsequent changes in Devourer operational patterns," ZYX Thor continued. "It appears your forces may be conducting operations that affect enemy behavior in ways that benefit other species' defensive efforts. Our forces conduct operations designed to defend human territory," Warren replied carefully. "Any effects on Devourer behavior elsewhere would be coincidental." ZYX Thor's expression suggested he didn't entirely believe that explanation, but he pressed on anyway. "Dr. Warren, if humanity is indeed planning some kind of broader strategic operation against the Devourers, we formally request coordination with our remaining military forces. Combined operations might prove more effective than independent actions." "There are no broader strategic operations," Warren lied smoothly. "Humanity is focused entirely on defending our own worlds and populations. The galaxy is dying," Thor said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of countless lost civilizations. In the past month alone, we've lost another 15 major species to complete extinction. At current rates, organized galactic civilization will cease to exist within 8 to 10 weeks. Warren felt a brief pang of sympathy for the desperate alien diplomat, but she ruthlessly suppressed it. Sympathy was a luxury humanity couldn't afford, not when the survival of their entire species depended on maintaining operational security until the bioweapons could be deployed. "I'm sorry for your losses," she said finally. "But humanity cannot commit resources to operations beyond our established defensive perimeter. Our responsibility is to our own people first." Thor stared at her through the holographic display for several long moments, and Warren had the uncomfortable impression that the alien diplomat understood far more about human nature than he was revealing. "Very well," he said at last. "I hope your people's survival strategies prove successful, Dr. Warren, for all our sakes." The transmission ended, leaving Warren alone with her team and the weight of what they were about to unleash upon the galaxy. In less than 6 hours, modified freighter ships would begin deploying bioweapons that would fundamentally alter the nature of the Devourer threat. If the weapons worked as designed, the enemy swarms would begin collapsing from within over the following weeks and months. If they worked too well, or in ways that humanity hadn't anticipated, the bioweapons might spread beyond their intended targets and begin affecting other organic life throughout the galaxy. The safeguards were extensive and had been tested thoroughly, but biological systems were notoriously unpredictable under real-world conditions. Dr. Warren called Dr. Peterson from the monitoring station. "We're receiving reports from frontier observation posts. Multiple Devourer swarms are converging on the Nexus system. It looks like they're preparing for a major assault on the Council's emergency headquarters." Warren studied the tactical displays with professional interest. The timing was actually perfect for humanity's purposes. A major Devourer assault would provide excellent cover for bioweapon deployment operations. While the enemy focused on consuming their traditional opponents, human freighters could distribute their deadly cargo throughout the surrounding regions. "Estimated time until the assault begins?" she asked. 18 to 24 hours, based on current approach velocities, Peterson replied, "which gives our bioweapons time to reach their deployment zones before the enemy becomes fully engaged with Council forces," observed Dr. Chun. "The distraction should provide excellent cover for our operations." Warren nodded, though part of her couldn't help wondering how many Council members would survive the coming assault. Beings like Thor had spent their entire careers working toward galactic cooperation and peaceful coexistence. Now they would die fighting an enemy that respected neither cooperation nor peace, never knowing that their final sacrifice was providing cover for humanity's attempt to save what remained of galactic civilization. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Roberts announced, "we're receiving confirmation from Fleet Command. All deployment vessels are ready and awaiting final authorization." This was it, the moment when humanity would either save the galaxy or doom it to an even worse fate than simple Devourer consumption. Warren took a deep breath and activated her command authorization codes. "All units, this is Control. Operation Nemesis is authorized for immediate execution. Good luck, and remember, failure is not an option." Throughout human space, modified freighter vessels began launching from hidden bases and orbital facilities. Each ship carried carefully packaged bioweapons that represented humanity's best hope for survival and their greatest risk of creating something worse than the crisis they were trying to solve. As the ships departed for their deployment zones, Warren found herself thinking about the conversation with Ambassador Thor. The alien diplomat had been correct about humanity conducting broader strategic operations, but wrong about their willingness to coordinate with other species. Humans had learned long ago that the most effective military operations were those conducted without enemy knowledge or interference. The Galactic Council represented potential interference, even if their intentions were beneficial. Better to act independently and present the galaxy with a fait accompli once the bioweapons had eliminated the Devourer threat. If the operation succeeded, humanity would emerge as the dominant military power in a galaxy that had been conveniently cleared of most potential rivals. If it failed, at least they would die fighting on their own terms rather than as part of someone else's desperate last stand. Either outcome was preferable to the slow extinction that awaited any species foolish enough to fight the Devourers using conventional methods. The galaxy had rejected humanity for being too violent and unpredictable, but those same qualities were about to become their salvation. Warren returned to her monitoring station and settled in to wait. Within hours, they would know whether humanity's greatest gamble had succeeded or whether they had simply accelerated their own extinction through biological warfare gone wrong. The next few days would determine not just the fate of human civilization, but the future of all intelligent life in the galaxy. And that future now rested entirely in the hands of a species that the galaxy had once considered unworthy of membership in civilized space. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 12 species gathered in emergency session. Ambassador Thelnox of the Zenthari Federation clutched his communication device with trembling claws, his usually pristine blue scales now dulled with stress. The message had arrived 3 solar cycles ago, and its contents had shaken the very foundations of their peaceful confederation. The Devourers have breached the Outer Rim, announced High Counselor Vexura, her crystalline voice echoing through the vast chamber. The assembled delegates fell silent, their various forms of breathing creating an eerie symphony of fear. 17 worlds have gone dark. No survivors, no debris, nothing but empty space where thriving civilizations once existed. The holographic display at the chamber's center flickered to life, showing a 3-dimensional map of their galaxy. Red markers indicated the lost worlds, forming a terrifying pattern that pointed directly toward the core systems. Among those core systems was Earth, a small blue world that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Ambassador Kethare of the Aquarian Depths raised one of her 6 arms. How long do we have before they reach the inner systems? At their current rate of advancement, perhaps 50 rotations, Vexera replied, her crystal form dimming with sorrow. Maybe less. The chamber erupted in panicked chittering, clicking, and various other sounds of distress. The Devourers were a nightmare made real, a hive-minded species that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing behind but cosmic dust. They had appeared from the galactic void without warning, their technology far surpassing anything the peaceful council species possessed. We must evacuate, declared Ambassador Zorthak of the Hegemony Worlds, his reptilian features twisted with resignation. Gather our populations and flee to the Andromeda Galaxy. It's our only hope. Many delegates nodded in agreement, but Ambassador Thelnox found himself thinking of something else entirely. During his recent diplomatic mission to the Sol system, he had encountered the humans of Earth. They were a young species, barely a century into space travel, but something about them had unsettled him in a way he couldn't quite explain. What about the humans? Thelnox asked, his voice cutting through the panic. The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence carried a different quality. Uncomfortable, almost guilty. The humans, Vexera's tone suggested she had hoped no one would bring them up. They are too primitive to evacuate efficiently. Their population is too large, their technology too limited. By the time we could organize a proper evacuation. You mean we're abandoning them? Thelnox said flatly. We have limited resources, Zorthak interjected. We must prioritize species with advanced spacefaring capabilities. The humans have only just achieved basic FTL drives. They can barely reach their own outer planets, let alone evacuate billions of individuals to another galaxy. Thelnox's scales bristled with indignation. So we simply leave them to die? An entire species, billions of sentient beings, because they're inconvenient to save. It's a harsh calculation, admitted Counselor Yith of the Neural Collective, his telepathic voice resonating directly in their minds. But we cannot save everyone. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, Felnox finished bitterly. How convenient that the few happen to be the ones we find most expendable. High Counselor Vexera's form pulsed with authority. The decision is made. We begin evacuation procedures immediately. All Council species will be notified to prepare for exodus to Andromeda. The humans will not be informed of the approaching threat. There is no point in causing panic when we cannot offer salvation. As the session dissolved into logistical planning, Felnox remained in his seat, staring at the holographic display. The small blued, representing Earth, seemed to pulse with defiant light, as if aware of its impending doom. He thought of his time on that world, of the strange, contradictory creatures he had encountered there. The humans were indeed primitive by Council standards. Their technology was crude, their society fractured by countless divisions. They fought among themselves with a ferocity that shocked more civilized species. Yet there had been something else, something the other Council members had missed or chosen to ignore. Felnox remembered standing in what the humans called the Museum of Natural History in their city of New York. He had been examining their primitive artifacts when a small human child, no more than 7 of their years, had approached him without fear. Most species young instinctively cowered from alien forms, but this child had simply stared at him with curious brown eyes. "Are you a dragon?" the child had asked in their simple language. Felnox had been amused. "Dragons are mythological creatures from your world. I'm quite real." "Dragons were real too," the child had said with absolute certainty. "They just look different than in the stories. Everything scary becomes a story eventually." The child's guardian, a female human, had apologized for the interruption, but the child's words had stayed with Felnox. Everything scary becomes a story eventually. It suggested a species that faced their fears head-on, that transformed terror into legend through the sheer force of their will to survive. During his diplomatic stay, Felnox had also witnessed something else that troubled the Council members. The humans' entertainment was filled with scenarios where their species faced extinction from alien threats, and in every story, every film, every piece of fiction, the humans fought back. They never simply accepted defeat, never chose peaceful evacuation over desperate resistance. More disturbing still were their historical records. The humans had survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, and countless wars that should have destroyed them. They had rebuilt from every catastrophe stronger than before. When faced with seemingly insurmountable odds, they didn't despair. They adapted, evolved, and overcame. The Council members saw this as primitive savagery, but Felnox wondered if they were missing something crucial. The humans came from what the Council classified as a death world, a planet so hostile that it regularly attempted to kill its own inhabitants. Extreme weather, predators, diseases, natural disasters. Earth threw everything it had at humanity, and humanity had not only survived, but thrived. More importantly, they had never been conquered. Every species in the Council had stories of ancient defeats, periods when their civilizations had fallen to superior forces and been rebuilt by survivors. Not humans. They had never known the boot of an alien conqueror, never experienced the helplessness of total defeat. They simply didn't have the concept of acceptable loss when it came to their entire species. As the evacuation planning continued around him, Felnox made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. He activated his personal communication device and sent a coded message to his ship, ordering his pilot to set course for Earth immediately. If the Council wouldn't warn the humans, he would do it himself. The journey to Earth took 2 full rotations at maximum FTL speed. As his ship entered the Sol system, Felnox was struck again by how young everything seemed. The humans had barely established colonies on Mars, and their moon. Their space stations were crude constructions of metal and glass, holding together through engineering determination rather than elegant design. But as he approached Earth itself, something made him pause. The planet's orbital space was more crowded than he remembered. Hundreds of new satellites had been launched in the short time since his last visit, and Construction on several larger orbital platforms was clearly underway. For a species supposedly on the verge of extinction, the humans seemed remarkably busy expanding their presence in space. His communication system crackled to life as Earth's primitive traffic control systems detected his approach. Unidentified vessel. This is Earth Orbital Control. Please identify yourself and state your purpose. This is Ambassador Thelnox of the Zenthari Federation, he replied in their language. Requesting immediate audience with your planetary leadership. I carry urgent information regarding a galactic threat. There was a long pause before the response came. Ambassador, you are cleared for landing at Luna Station. Human representatives will meet you there. Luna Station was humanity's primary diplomatic facility, built in orbit around their moon. As Thelnox docked, he was surprised to see how much the station had expanded since his last visit. New modules had been added, and the engineering was notably more sophisticated than before. The human who greeted him was Admiral Sarah Chun, whom he had met during his previous diplomatic mission. She was a middle-aged woman with short gray hair and eyes that held the kind of sharp intelligence that made Thelnox uncomfortable. Humans had a way of looking at you that suggested they were cataloging weaknesses and strengths simultaneously. Ambassador Thelnox, Admiral Chen said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. This is unexpected. Your message mentioned a galactic threat. Admiral Chun, I bring grave news. The Galactic Council has discovered an approaching alien force called the Devourers. They have already destroyed 17 worlds and are moving toward the core systems. Earth is in their path. Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, which surprised him. Most species would have shown immediate signs of distress at such news. Instead, she simply nodded and gestured for him to follow her deeper into the station. How long do we have? She asked as they walked through corridors filled with human technicians and engineers working on projects he couldn't immediately identify. Perhaps 50 rotations by council estimates. Admiral, there's something else. The council has voted to evacuate all member species to the Andromeda Galaxy. They have decided that humanity cannot be saved due to your limited spacefaring capabilities. Again, Admiral Chun showed no emotional reaction. I see. And you came here to warn us despite this decision. Yes, I felt it was the right thing to do. Your species deserves a chance to save itself, or at least to die knowing what killed you. Admiral Chun stopped walking and turned to face him. For a moment, her calm facade cracked, and Thelnox saw something in her eyes that made his scales prickle with unease. It wasn't fear or despair. It was something far more dangerous. Ambassador, she said quietly, did you really think we didn't know? The question hit him like a physical blow. What do you mean? Come with me, Admiral Chun said, leading him to a heavily secured section of the station. I think it's time we showed you what humanity does when someone threatens our home. The blast doors opened to reveal a command center unlike anything Thelnox had ever seen. Hundreds of humans worked at stations displaying tactical information, fleet movements, and technological schematics. Massive displays showed real-time information from across the galaxy, including detailed tracking of the Devourer fleet's movements. We've been monitoring the situation for over a month, Admiral Chen explained. Our deep space listening posts picked up the distress signals from the Outer Rim worlds. We've been tracking the Devourers ever since. Thelnox stared in shock at the sophistication of the human intelligence network. This is impossible. Your technology is more advanced than we've let on, Admiral Chen finished. Did you really think we'd achieve faster-than-light travel without also developing other capabilities? We've been watching the galactic community for decades, learning from your transmissions, improving our technology. We just chose not to advertise our progress. Another human approached, General Marcus Webb, a tall man with scars on his face that spoke of actual combat experience. Admiral, the fleet is ready for deployment. All battle groups have reported in. Fleet? Thelnox asked weakly. Admiral Chen smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Ambassador, Let me explain something about humanity that your council never understood. We don't just roll over when something threatens us. We don't evacuate. We don't surrender. When something wants to destroy our home, we destroy it first. The main display changed to show the outer system, and Thelnox's world tilted. Emerging from what he had thought was empty space came ships. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. Sleek, deadly vessels that bore no resemblance to the crude human technology he had observed before. "This is Battle Fleet Prometheus," Admiral Chun said with evident pride. 700 ships, each equipped with weapons that would give your council nightmares. We've been building in secret for 30 years, ever since we first detected alien signals and realized we might not be alone in the universe. "But how?" Thelnox whispered. "Your industrial capacity, your resources are far greater than you assumed," General Webb interjected. "Earth isn't just one world, Ambassador. It's a world full of humans. 8 billion problem solvers who don't like being told something is impossible. When we learned about the galactic community, we didn't just try to join it. We prepared to defend against it." Admiral Chun touched a control, and the display zoomed in on one of the human ships. It was massive, easily dwarfing the largest council vessels, and bristling with weapons that Thelnox couldn't immediately identify. "The Devourers think they're apex predators," Admiral Chun said softly. "They've never met humans before. They're about to learn why Earth is classified as a death world, and why the species that evolved here should never be underestimated." As Thelnox watched in stunned silence, the human fleet began to move. Not toward the inner system to establish defensive positions, but outward toward the approaching Devourer swarm. They weren't planning to defend Earth. They were planning to attack. "Admiral," Thelnox said, his voice shaking, "surely you don't mean to face the Devourers directly? Their technology is far beyond anything the Council possesses. They've destroyed advanced civilizations without facing humans." "Admiral," Chun interrupted. "The Council species are peaceful, Ambassador. They've forgotten how to really fight, how to kill efficiently and without mercy. They've had peace for so long that war has become abstract to them. But humans," she gestured at the fleet display, "we've never stopped being predators. We just learned to point our predatory instincts at threats to our species instead of at each other." General Webb stepped forward, his scarred face grim. "The Devourers consume worlds, Ambassador. But Earth has been trying to kill humans for 200,000 years, and we're still here. We've faced ice ages, volcanic winters, plagues that killed half our population, and we've not only survived but grown stronger. The Devourers are just another extinction event to overcome." The implications crashed over Thelnox like a tidal wave. The humans hadn't been caught off guard. They hadn't been abandoned to die. They had been preparing for this moment, building weapons and ships in secret while presenting themselves as harmless primitives to the galactic community. "You let us underestimate you," he said, the pieces falling into place. "The Council thinks you're helpless savages barely capable of spaceflight. And we encourage that belief," Admiral Chun confirmed. "It's much easier to prepare for war when your potential enemies don't see you as a threat. The Council's arrogance has been our greatest advantage." The command center hummed with quiet efficiency as hundreds of humans coordinated the largest military operation in their species' history. Thelnox watched displays showing supply lines, ammunition counts, and tactical projections that demonstrated a level of military sophistication that exceeded anything in his experience. "How long have you been planning this?" he asked. "Since the day we achieved FTL travel and realized we were entering a larger galactic community," Admiral Chun replied. "We hoped for peace, but we prepared for war. It's what humans do." A new voice cut through the command center chatter. "Admiral, this is Captain Rodriguez aboard the UES Defiance. The fleet is in position at the jump point, awaiting orders to engage the enemy." Admiral Chun looked at Thelnox one last time. "Ambassador, I suggest you return to your people. Tell them that the humans they abandoned to die send their regards. And Tell them that when this is over, we'll be having a very different conversation about humanity's place in the galaxy." As alarms began to sound and the human fleet prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed, Thelnox realized that everything the Council thought they knew about humanity had been wrong. They weren't primitive savages to be protected or abandoned. They were apex predators who had been waiting for prey worthy of their attention. The Devourers had made a crucial mistake. They had threatened Earth without understanding what Earth had produced in its billions of years of evolutionary warfare. They were about to meet the children of a death world and learn why some species should never be provoked. The void between stars had never witnessed anything like the human fleet that materialized at the edge of Devourer space. 700 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with a dull gray finish that spoke of purely functional design. No decorative elements, no artistic flourishes, just weapons, armor, and engines arranged in configurations that screamed lethality. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the tactical displays with the calm focus of a predator sizing up her prey. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, their movements precise and economical. No wasted motion, no unnecessary chatter. They had trained for this moment their entire careers. Long-range sensors are detecting the Devourer swarm, reported Lieutenant Commander Jackson from the sensor station. Bearing 27 Mark IV. Distance approximately 8 light minutes, and closing. Admiral Chin nodded, studying the sensor readings on her command display. The Devourer fleet was massive. Thousands of biomechanical ships that moved in organic patterns like a vast school of predatory fish. Intelligence reports suggested each ship was grown rather than built, created by the hive mind that controlled the swarm. Composition analysis? She asked. 12,000 individual vessels, ranging from frigate-sized scouts to dreadnoughts, approximately 4 times the mass of our heaviest battleships, Jackson replied. Energy signatures are off the charts, Admiral. Their power generation capabilities exceed our models. Weapons? Unknown configuration, but the energy output suggests they could crack a planet's crust with sustained fire. No wonder the Council worlds fell so quickly. Captain Elena Rodriguez, Admiral Chin's second-in-command, stepped up beside her. Rodriguez was a combat veteran who had earned her position through the brutal wars that had finally united humanity under a single banner. Her dark eyes held the kind of hard intelligence that came from surviving battles that should have killed her. Admiral, the other battle groups are reporting ready status. All ships are at battle stations. All weapons systems are online. Engineering reports that our new reactor designs are performing within parameters. We're as ready as we'll ever be. Admiral Chun allowed herself a small smile. 30 years of preparation had led to this moment. While the galactic community believed humans were struggling with basic space travel, Earth's best minds had been working in secret. Hidden shipyards in the asteroid belt had constructed the fleet using resources mined from dead worlds throughout the Sol system. Advanced AI systems, reverse-engineered alien technology, and human ingenuity had combined to create weapons that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Status on the Prometheus Protocol? Admiral Chin asked. All ships are equipped and ready, Rodriguez confirmed. Dr. Harrison's team has outdone themselves. The quantum targeting systems are showing 97% accuracy in simulations. The Prometheus Protocol was humanity's secret weapon, developed after studying intercepted Devourer communications. The aliens shared a hive mind connection that made them nearly impossible to surprise or outmaneuver. But human scientists had discovered that the quantum entanglement that enabled their telepathic links could also be weaponized against them. Sir, called out communications, Officer Park. We're receiving a transmission from the Devourer fleet. It appears to be a standard consumption warning. Put it through, Admiral Chin ordered. The main screen flickered, and a nightmarish image appeared. The Devourer communication node was part machine, part biological organism, with multiple sensory organs arranged around a central speaking apparatus. When it spoke, The voice was a harmony of thousands of individual minds speaking as one. Biological entities of the third planetary body, the creature intoned. You will cease resistance and prepare for consumption. Your matter and energy will be incorporated into our collective. Resistance is futile. We are eternal. We are inevitable. We have consumed civilizations across 1,000 star systems. Admiral Chun stepped forward, facing the screen with her hands clasped behind her back. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Fleet. I have a message for your collective. The multiple eyes of the Devourer communication node focused on her with predatory interest. Speak your final words, biological entity. They will be recorded for analysis before your consumption. My message is simple, Admiral Chun said, her voice carrying the cold authority that had made her the most feared admiral in human space. You picked the wrong species to threaten. She gestured to Captain Rodriguez, who nodded to the communications officer. Across the human fleet, a signal went out that activated systems that had never been tested in combat. The Devourers detected the quantum pulse 3 seconds before it hit their fleet. In their shared consciousness, alarm spread like wildfire as they realized the humans had somehow weaponized the very force that bound their minds together. But 3 seconds wasn't enough time to react. The quantum disruption wave struck the Devourer fleet like an invisible tsunami. For the first time in their species' existence, the hive-mind connection was severed. Thousands of ships suddenly found themselves operating with individual consciousness instead of collective intelligence. The perfect coordination that had made them invincible dissolved into chaos as each ship began acting independently. Direct hit on their formation, reported Lieutenant Commander Jackson, his voice filled with satisfaction. The quantum disruption is propagating through their entire fleet. Their movement patterns are becoming erratic. Excellent, Admiral Chun said calmly. Captain Rodriguez, signal all battle groups. Begin the attack. The human fleet moved forward with mechanical precision, accelerating to attack speed while maintaining perfect formation. Unlike the organic flowing movement of the Devourer swarm, the human ships moved in straight lines and perfect angles, their courses calculated by AI systems that process thousands of variables per second. Enemy fleet is attempting to reform their battle line, Jackson reported. But they're having coordination problems. Individual ships are breaking formation. On the tactical display, Admiral Chun could see the effect of their first strike. The Devourer fleet, once moving like a single organism, was now fragmenting into smaller groups. Some ships were attempting to retreat, others were charging forward without support, and many seemed to be simply drifting as their individual minds struggled to cope with the sudden isolation. Engage at maximum range, Admiral Chun ordered. Target their larger vessels first. Let's see how they handle human firepower. The space between the two fleets erupted in streams of coherent energy as the human ships opened fire. But these weren't the simple particle beams or plasma cannons that most galactic species used. Human weapons have been designed with one purpose: to kill efficiently and overwhelmingly. Graviton cannons twisted space-time itself into weapons, creating gravity wells that crushed enemy ships from the inside. Quantum disruptors tore apart the molecular bonds holding matter together. And the humans' most devastating weapons, the entropy bombs, accelerated time around their targets, causing enemy ships to age centuries in seconds. The first volley struck the Devourer fleet like the hammer of an angry god. Ships that had seemed invulnerable to council weapons simply disintegrated under the assault. The biomechanical hulls that could regenerate from normal damage found themselves facing destruction on a quantum level. 37 confirmed kills on the first volley, Jackson reported, his voice showing the professional satisfaction of a job well done. Enemy fleet is in full disorder. But the Devourers were not helpless. As their initial shock wore off, the individual ship minds began adapting to their new situation. Return fire began to lance across space, and Admiral Chun felt the retribution shudder as energy beams struck their shields. Shields holding at 87%, reported the engineering officer. Their weapons are powerful, but our defensive systems are handling them. Good, Admiral Chun said. Captain Rodriguez, deploy the Reaper squadrons. Let's test their point defense systems. Throughout the human fleet, launch bays opened and disgorged thousands of small, fast attack craft. The Reapers were unmanned drones controlled by AI systems that could think and react faster than any biological mind. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a Council frigate, and they moved with the terrifying precision of machines designed for one purpose. The Reaper swarms spread out across the battlefield like a cloud of metallic locusts. They moved in complex, three-dimensional patterns, appearing and disappearing from sensor range as their stealth systems engaged and disengaged. The Devourers tried to target them, but the drones were too small, too fast, and too numerous. Reapers are engaging enemy point defense systems, reported the tactical officer. They're overwhelming their targeting computers. Admiral Chun watched the battle unfold on her displays, noting the tactical lessons being learned with each exchange of fire. The Devourers were formidable opponents. Their weapons were powerful, their hulls were tough, and their individual ships showed remarkable adaptability. But they had one crucial weakness. They had never faced an opponent that fought the way humans did. Galactic Council species fought with honor, following established rules of engagement and attempting to minimize casualties on both sides. Even when defending their homeworlds, they tried to find diplomatic solutions and avoided total destruction of enemy forces. Humans had no such limitations. They had evolved as persistent hunters, creatures that chased their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Their entire civilization had been forged in the crucible of total war, where the only acceptable outcome was the complete destruction of the enemy's ability to threaten them. Admiral, Captain Rodriguez said, studying her own tactical displays, the Devourer fleet is attempting to regroup. They're pulling back to a defensive formation around their largest vessels. Smart, Admiral Chun acknowledged. They're learning. Signal Battle Group Omega to begin the flanking maneuver. Let's see how they adapt to multi-vector assault. The human fleet split into 3 groups, approaching the Devourers from different angles while maintaining coordinated fire patterns. It was a classic pincer movement, but executed with a precision that would have been impossible without their advanced AI coordination systems. The Devourers responded by forming a defensive sphere with their largest ships in the center and smaller vessels arranged in protective layers around them. It was a sound tactical decision, but it had one flaw. It was predictable. Battle Group Omega is in position, Rodriguez reported. All groups report ready for the hammer strike. Admiral Chun took a deep breath, thinking of the 17 worlds the Devourers had consumed, of the billions of lives lost to their appetite. The galactic community had fled from these monsters, abandoning entire species to their fate. But humans didn't flee from nightmares. They became nightmares themselves. Execute hammer strike, she ordered. The 3 human battle groups struck simultaneously from different vectors, their concentrated firepower focused on specific points in the Devourer defensive formation. The alien sphere formation, designed to provide mutual support, became a trap as human weapons created overlapping fields of destruction. Graviton cannons created gravity wells that pulled Devourer ships out of formation, exposing them to concentrated fire from quantum disruptors. Entropy bombs aged entire sections of the alien fleet into scrap metal in seconds. And through it all, the Reaper drones swarmed like angry wasps, targeting engine systems and communication nodes. The battle raged for 6 hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The Devourers were learning and adapting, but they were learning human tactics from humans who had been developing those tactics for 30 years. Every adaptation they made had been anticipated, every countermeasure had been planned for. When it ended, the space between the stars was filled with the wreckage of what had once been the most feared force in the galaxy. Of the 12,000 ships that had comprised the Devourer's swarm, fewer than 300 remained, and those were scattered, damaged, and fleeing in random directions. Tactical assessment. Admiral Chen requested. The Devourer fleet is effectively destroyed, Lieutenant Commander Jackson reported. Remaining ships appear to be individual survivors operating without coordination. They pose no significant threat to fleet operations. Admiral Chen nodded, studying the battle damage reports. The human fleet had lost 43 ships, a painful but acceptable loss ratio. More importantly, they had proven that the Devourers could be beaten. Captain Rodriguez, have our intelligence teams analyze the wreckage. I want to know everything about their technology, their biology, and their home systems. And send a message to Earth Command. Tell them Phase 1 is complete. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. Phase 1, Admiral? Admiral Chen smiled, and it was the expression of a predator that had tasted blood and found it good. We've proven we can beat them in open combat. Now comes the hard part. We're going to hunt down every last Devourer in the galaxy and make sure they never threaten anyone again. She turned to address the communications officer. Send a message to the Galactic Council. Tell them that the human fleet has engaged and defeated a Devourer swarm. Tell them we're pursuing the survivors and that any Council species wishing to assist in the extermination effort should contact Earth Command for coordination. Admiral, Park said uncertainly, should we mention our capabilities? Oh yes, Admiral Chen said with satisfaction. Tell them exactly what we used to win. I think it's time the galaxy learned what humanity is really capable of. As the human fleet regrouped and began pursuing the scattered Devourer survivors, a new message began transmitting across the galaxy. It would reach the Council chambers within days, and when it did, every assumption about humanity would be shattered. The children of the Death World had announced themselves to the galaxy, and they had done so by accomplishing what no other species had managed. They had made the Devourers afraid. The Galactic Council chamber had never hosted an emergency session quite like this one. Ambassador Thelnox stood at the central podium, his blue scales still pale from exhaustion as he finished his report about the human fleet's devastating victory over the Devourers. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 12 species sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just heard. Impossible, declared Ambassador Zorthak of the Hegemony Worlds, his reptilian voice cracking with disbelief. The humans barely possess faster-than-light travel. They couldn't possibly have the industrial capacity to build a fleet capable of defeating the Devourers. High Counselor Vexera's crystalline form pulsed with agitation. Ambassador Thelnox, are you certain of what you witnessed? Perhaps what appeared to be a human victory was actually— I was there, Thelnox interrupted, his voice carrying an edge that made several delegates flinch. I stood on their command vessel and watched them coordinate the most sophisticated military operation I have ever witnessed. The humans didn't just defeat the Devourers, they obliterated them. The chamber erupted in nervous chittering and clicking as delegates absorbed this information. The Devourers had been an unstoppable force, consuming advanced civilizations with ease. The idea that primitive humans had not only stopped them, but destroyed them was beyond their comprehension. How many ships did they lose? Asked Counselor Yith of the Neural Collective, his telepathic voice carrying undertones of desperate hope. 43 vessels out of 700, Thelnox replied. A casualty rate of approximately 6%. By military standards, it was a decisive victory achieved with minimal losses. The silence that followed was deafening. Every species in the Council had war colleges, military academies, and strategic planning committees. They all understood what those numbers meant. The humans hadn't just won. They had won so convincingly that the engagement could barely be called a battle. Ambassador Kethare of the Aquarian Depths raised one of her 6 arms. What weapons did they use? Our intelligence reports suggest Council military technology is centuries ahead of human capabilities. Thelnox's scales darkened with remembered unease. They used weapons we've never seen before. graviton cannons that manipulate space-time itself, quantum disruptors that tear apart molecular bonds, and something they called entropy bombs that accelerate time around the target. Their technology wasn't just advanced, it was revolutionary. Graviton manipulation? Vexera's form flickered with surprise. Our theoretical physics departments have been working on that concept for millennia without success. You're saying the humans have weaponized it. Not just weaponized, Thelnox said grimly. Perfected. They deployed it with casual efficiency, as if it were standard equipment. And that wasn't even their most disturbing capability. He touched a control on his communication device, and a holographic message began playing in the center of the chamber. Admiral Chen's image appeared, her human features set in an expression of professional courtesy that somehow managed to be more threatening than any snarl. Honorable members of the Galactic Council, the recording began. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Fleet. I bring greetings from humanity and a report on our recent engagement with the force you call the Devourers. The delegates leaned forward despite themselves, drawn by the strange confidence in the human's voice. Most species' military leaders spoke with the careful diplomacy of beings who understood their place in a larger hierarchy. Admiral Chun spoke like someone who answered to no one but herself. At approximately 1430 Galactic Standard Time, human forces engaged and destroyed a devourer swarm consisting of approximately 12,000 vessels. Enemy casualties were 97%. Human casualties were minimal. The threat to this sector has been eliminated. Gasps echoed through the chamber. 97% casualties meant virtual extinction of the attacking force. However, Admiral Chun continued, our intelligence indicates that this was only one of several Devourer fleets operating in different sectors. We have therefore initiated Operation Cleansing Dawn, a systematic campaign to locate and eliminate all remaining Devourer forces in the galaxy. Ambassador Zorthak half rose from his seat. Operation Cleansing Dawn? They're planning to hunt down all the Devourers. The recording continued, as if responding to his question. We understand that several Council species have been planning evacuation to the Andromeda Galaxy. While we respect your right to make this choice, we wish to inform you that evacuation is no longer necessary. Humanity will handle the Devourer threat. Counselor Yitha's telepathic voice carried pure incredulity. Handle the threat? They speak as if the Devourers are a minor inconvenience to be dealt with. Furthermore, Admiral Chen's image said, we would like to extend an invitation to any Council species interested in participating in joint operations against the Devourers. Human tactical doctrine emphasizes overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. We believe this approach would be instructive for species accustomed to more traditional military strategies. High Counselor Vexera's form dimmed with what humans might recognize as embarrassment. The polite insult was clear. The humans considered Council military tactics to be obsolete. In the interest of galactic security, the recording continued, humanity is prepared to share certain technologies with allied species, including improved defensive systems and communication networks. However, offensive weapons systems will remain under human control for the foreseeable future. The message ended with Admiral Chen's crisp salute, leaving the Council chamber in stunned silence. The implications were staggering. The humans weren't just offering to help. They were positioning themselves as the dominant military power in the galaxy. They're announcing a unilateral military campaign, Ambassador Kethare said slowly. Without Council approval, without consultation, they're declaring themselves the protectors of galactic civilization. And they have the power to make it stick, Thelnox added grimly. I've seen their fleet, their technology, their military organization. If they decide to hunt down every Devourer in the galaxy, I believe they can do it. The debate that followed was unlike any in Council history. Traditional diplomacy assumed that all parties were roughly equal in power, that negotiations were conducted between peers who had to find mutually acceptable compromises. But the humans had shattered that assumption. They had power that dwarfed the entire Council combined, and they were using it unilaterally. We must demand that they submit their military plans for council approval, insisted Ambassador Zorthak. No single species can be allowed to dictate galactic policy. With what leverage? Thelnox asked bluntly. They've just proven they can accomplish in hours what we couldn't do in centuries. What exactly do we threaten them with? The uncomfortable truth hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The Council had built their civilization on the assumption that military power was distributed among many species, creating a balance where diplomacy was necessary. The humans had destroyed that balance overnight. Perhaps, suggested Counselor Yith carefully, we should consider the benefits of this development. The Devourers are gone. Our worlds are safe. Does it matter who eliminated the threat? Of course it matters, Vexera said, her crystalline voice sharp with authority. If humanity can destroy the Devourers this easily, what else can they destroy? What happens when human interests conflict with Council decisions? Do we submit to them because they have superior firepower? It was a question that cut to the heart of everything the Council represented. They had built a civilization based on cooperation, consensus, and mutual respect. The humans represented something else entirely, the application of superior force to achieve desired outcomes. There's something else, Thelnox said reluctantly. During my time on their command ship, I observed their strategic planning sessions. They're not just thinking about the Devourers. They're conducting a comprehensive analysis of galactic civilization, our strengths, our weaknesses, our technological capabilities, our military doctrines. Intelligence gathering, Ambassador Kethare said with growing alarm. They're treating us as potential threats to be monitored and evaluated. Or potential targets, Zorthak added darkly. If they can eliminate the Devourers, they can eliminate anyone who opposes them. The chamber fell silent again as each delegate contemplated a galaxy where humanity held overwhelming military superiority. It was a future none of them had imagined possible just days earlier. High Counselor Vexera stood, her crystalline form reflecting the chamber's lights in patterns that suggested deep thought. We face a choice that will define the future of galactic civilization. Do we accept humanity as our protectors, knowing that protection comes at the cost of our independence? Or do we resist their dominance and risk military confrontation with a species that has just demonstrated capabilities beyond our comprehension? There's a third option, Thelnox said quietly. We could try to understand them. During my time with the humans, I observed something that our intelligence reports missed. They're not conquerors in the traditional sense. They don't seem interested in ruling other species or claiming territory. They want to eliminate threats and ensure their own security. That's even worse, Counselor Yith observed. Conquerors can be negotiated with, bribed, or appeased. Security-focused species are unpredictable. They might decide that our very existence represents a potential threat. Before anyone could respond, the chamber's communication system activated. A priority message was coming through on diplomatic channels, encoded with human transmission protocols. This is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the United Earth Fleet, the new voice said. Unlike Admiral Chen's recorded message, this was a live transmission. I'm speaking from the bridge of the UES Nemesis, currently in orbit around the former Devourer homeworld of Keth Moran Prime. The chamber fell completely silent. No one had known the location of the Devourer homeworld, despite decades of intelligence efforts. 3 hours ago, human forces completed the systematic elimination of all Devourer breeding facilities, command structures, and resource processing centers in this system. We have confirmed that no viable Devourer population remains. The species that has terrorized the galaxy for centuries is now extinct. Extinct. The word hit the council chamber like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just defeated the Devourers. They had hunted them to their homeworld and exterminated them completely. We are transmitting complete tactical and intelligence data from our campaign to all council species, Captain Rodriguez continued. This information includes Devourer technology, biology, and strategic analysis that may be useful for future reference. We are also providing coordinates for 17 liberated worlds that were in the process of being consumed. Several billion beings in various stages of the devourer absorption process have been rescued and require immediate medical and psychological assistance. The generosity of the offer was almost as stunning as the military achievement. The humans were freely sharing intelligence that had cost them lives to obtain, and they were asking for help with rescue operations rather than claiming the liberated worlds for themselves. Finally, Rodriguez said, Admiral Chun has asked me to extend a formal invitation to the Galactic Council. Humanity would like to open diplomatic relations with all member species and discuss our mutual role in galactic security. We recognize that our recent actions may have caused concern about human intentions, and we believe direct dialogue is the best way to address these concerns. The transmission ended, leaving the Council in stunned silence. The humans had eliminated the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known, rescued billions of victims, and then politely requested a diplomatic meeting to discuss everyone's concerns. They're not acting like conquerors, Felnox said slowly. They're acting like the dominant predator that has eliminated a rival and is now establishing territorial boundaries with neighboring species. High Counselor Vexera's form pulsed with nervous energy, which means they see us as neighbors rather than subjects. That's potentially better than conquest, but it still means accepting that humanity is now the apex power in galactic civilization. The vote, when it came, was closer than anyone expected. 6 species voted to accept the human diplomatic invitation. 5 voted to maintain current evacuation plans and flee to Andromeda. 1 species, the Neural Collective, abstained, requesting time to process the psychological implications of humanity's actions. The motion passes, Vexera announced. We will send a delegation to meet with human representatives. May whatever cosmic force watches over us all help us navigate what comes next. As the council session ended and delegates began preparing for the most important diplomatic mission in galactic history, none of them noticed the small human observation drone that had been silently monitoring their deliberations from the chamber's ventilation system. Humanity had not only announced their presence, they had been listening to every word of the galaxy's response. The children of the Death World were learning about their new neighbors, and they were very, very thorough in their education.